Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Union officials representing thousands of Alberta healthcare sector employees say ambulance services in our province are at a breaking point. In honor of our veterans and the 100th anniversary of the Poppy, a local legion has come up with a unique way to donate. And we hear from Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder, who speaks out against some of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recent minister appointments.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says we're not out of the fourth wave just yet. Hinshaw says over the past 24 hours, our province saw 12 new COVID-19 related deaths. There was an increase of 531 active cases over the past 24 hours as well. There are 779 people in hospital with COVID-19, along with 185 in ICU. Overall, there are 8,387 active cases of COVID-19 across the province. As for vaccine doses, just over 6.5 million have been dished out so far. Hinshaw says with Halloween just around the corner, it's important not to hand out candy if you're feeling unwell. She also offered up tips for trick-or-treaters.
If you are going trick-or-treating, only go with members of your household. Be sure to wear a non-medical mask and sanitize your hands often. If you're handing out candy, please look for ways to limit contact with others. That may mean setting treats out outside, spaced apart for contactless pickup, or using tongs to hand them out while wearing a mask.
A union representing thousands of Alberta healthcare sector employees says the state of ambulance services in the province is dire. The Health Sciences Association of Alberta says it's at the point where people can no longer be certain an ambulance will be available when they need one. President Mike Parkers says there have been 135 red alerts in recent weeks in 12 communities, including Calgary and Edmonton. Alberta Health Services says it is seeing an increase in emergency calls, up 30% this year, but says those alerts may only last a few minutes and do not mean paramedics are unable to respond to emergencies. Alberta Justice Minister Casey Medu wrapped up his province-wide town hall tour, gathering information from concerned residents on rural crime. Minister Medu visited a total of 60 communities, including Cardston, Claresholm, and Redcliffe here in southern Alberta. Medu says the province has acted on many of the concerns Albertans brought forward, including a new independent parole board protecting Albertans from repeat offenders. The appointment of Alberta's first chief firearms officer, ensuring the appropriate enforcement of firearms legislation that respects Alberta's law-abiding gun owners, and increasing fines and possible prison time for people who trespass on private land in rural areas. The province has introduced legislation to give another insurance option for businesses facing high rates. It's called captive insurance, and if it's passed, Alberta would join BC as the only provinces in Canada to allow captive insurance. Finance Minister Travis Taves, who tabled the legislation, says the bill would help our province's agriculture and energy sectors when global insurance capacity is on the decline. He says his government believes it will help attract investment and help diversify the economy. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Poppy, and the Lethbridge Legion has instituted a whole new way for people to be able to donate. As Micah Quinn explains now, this year is also about remembering those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms.
You can continue to donate electronically for this year's Poppy campaign, and new this time around is a Poppy box with a QR code where you can donate money and watch a Poppy video.
20 years ago, it was all by cash or check. Society has changed, and the introduction of the barcodes this year is just another tool to help veterans in helping us to achieve the mission.
These boxes will be available in Lethbridge, Coaldale, Raymond, Stirling, and McGrath. The Legion is hoping to raise $90,000 for this campaign, and the money from the Poppy Fund will go directly towards helping out veterans and their families who need assistance.
We do all sorts of things from paying rent to medication for people, and the assessment that's done makes sure that no one is compromising the system in any way either. So everything is justified that goes out. We're not a charity in that sense. We're not the registered charity. It's the Poppy Trust Fund that is the charity.
Presentations were made on Thursday morning by the Lethbridge Legion to the Lethbridge Hurricanes, the Lethbridge Police Association, and Lethbridge District 51. Lethbridge School Division students participated in the Poppy Project, which were then donated to the Legion.
What they had done is they painted with the materials from the environment and then used watercolor paper to paint a poppy template. And so we are donating today 200 poppies that were painted by students in our school division. That's only the ones we were able to finish in the last few days. We have hundreds more.
The Poppy campaign runs until November 11th, and there will be a live stream of 2 Remembrance Day ceremonies that day. The first at the Lethbridge Cenotaph, and the second at Mountain View Cemetery. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
According to Food Banks Canada's annual hunger count report that was released Thursday morning, more than 116,000 Albertans visited a food bank in March of this year. That reflects a 30% increase from previous years. Executive Director with the Interfaith Food Bank here in Lethbridge, Daniel McIntyre, says increased demand plus rising costs due to inflation created by pandemic-related spending are creating a perfect storm of overwhelming demand on food banks.
As people are exhausting the temporary supports like CERB that had been available, we are seeing our numbers starting to return to our pre-pandemic numbers. I think a lot of times people equate the increase in food bank use just primarily to the pandemic, but the reality is that a lot of the temporary supports that have been available have been masking the underlying issues with our economy. So rising costs of food, housing, and transportation are really coupled with that pandemic to create a perfect storm that is causing us to be preparing for a tidal wave in the new year.
For those who attended the Lethbridge Hurricanes game at the NMAC Centre last Saturday, you may have noticed some issues that resulted in long lineups and delays. Some patrons thought the delay was due to staff checking guests for vaccination records. But according to representatives from both the Canes and the NMAC Centre, it was an issue with the Wi-Fi.
As a result, it affected many things of the way this building operates. It created long wait times, it created poor service, and the ability to operate the way we're used to, we were unable to do so because of that.
Right now what we're doing is we're going to measure and monitor our Wi-Fi with our IT department this weekend, thoroughly looking for any weaknesses, any other areas that could cause us a problem. We'll repair those, and then we're setting up some contingency plans both in the lounge at the front of our building and a few areas, so that if we do lose our Wi-Fi, we can quickly flip our systems over. In some cases to cellular service. In other cases, we'll just move to more of a manual format that moves people through quicker.
This weekend, the Canes host the Saskatoon Blades Friday night and the Winnipeg Ice on Saturday. Both games start at 7 o'clock. Lethbridge College held another open house. Now, for the past 2 years, the college has shifted its open house to an online format, but this year's one featured a combination of both on-campus and virtual events. The on-campus event allowed students the opportunity to visit different program tables and talk to instructors. The virtual online event featured live interviews and group Zoom sessions with programs. Associate Dean of Student Affairs, Lindsay Workman, says enrollment at the college has remained steady despite the pandemic.
The college has done an incredible job of continuing to offer educational experiences to students. Last year, mostly virtually, and we're really pleased that we're able to offer pretty much all classes in person now. So of course, as a result of the pandemic, there was a slight decrease in enrollment, but less than a difference of 100 students from the previous year. And then of course, because now we're into our second year of the pandemic, there is, I guess, a slight difference in enrollment as a result of that. So a few less students that are kind of going into that second year of study as a result.
Those who attended the open house can enter a draw to win one of 3 $500 tuition credits. The college will be offering another open house in the early spring. Now, if you're looking for something to do this Halloween weekend, you can check out a new show being put on by young actors and actresses. A Stony Gaze is set to hit the stage at the Sterndale Bennett Theatre. The cast is made up of 13 kids. Director of A Stony Gaze, Stephanie Costigan, says she came up with the story idea of A Stony Gaze as part of her assignment in college.
Our assignment was to write a short children's story. And I really, with anything I write, I really want to send a strong message. So with the story, what it entails is it's about Medusa. except kind of with a twist to it. The reason that people turn into stone when they see her is not because, she's trying to hurt them or be malicious. It's just because her ability is actually the way that others look at her and judge her. They look at her like an object instead of for who she is. It reflects back at them and they become that.
Estonia Gaze runs until Saturday and the admission is free. For more information on the show times, make sure you visit ngtheater.ca. Well, it's almost time to don on your favorite lederhosen and enjoy some German food and culture. Lethbridge will be hosting Oktoberfest, which is a traditional Munich festival. A total of 800 people will be allowed inside for the festivities. The Pogo Brothers Entertainment Company will be in charge of the event, and co-manager of the company, John Pogorelski, says he's hoping Oktoberfest will be a lot of fun for everyone, especially considering the current restrictions.
We've got wonderful German beer that we bring in every year. The band Alpenschatz is coming back, so we're going to have some live Pa music. And then my brother will be playing mid-round games where you can win great prizes, mostly free swag. But if you yodel well, you can take that. If you can hold the stein, you can win some prizes. We're even going to have a bratwurst eating competition both nights. So it's just going to be a lot of drinking, eating, singing some songs that my brother will guide everyone through, and just all around having a fun time.
Oktoberfest will run November 5th and 6th at Exhibition Park by the main pavilion. Well, we had another nice day here in the Windy City with temperatures in the double digits. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it's mild now, but there is a chance of snow mixed with rain in the not-so-distant future.
Well, it looks like there is a chance we could see some white stuff overnight on Friday night. So maybe not the greatest start to the weekend, unfortunately. But by Friday morning, we're looking at a mild start to the day. But then a low pressure system is going to be moving in, bringing with it rain. And tomorrow, also some southwest winds gusting to 90 kilometers per hour. And by overnight, Friday night, we're looking at a chance of rain or snow. But will it last? Well, I will have the rest of the weekend forecast for you coming up later on in the show.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder has spoken out against the Trudeau Liberals bringing on Stephen Guilbeault as Environment Minister. Guilbeault was a Greenpeace activist in Quebec. MP Harder says the recent appointments by the Trudeau Liberals appear to show that the PM prefers foreign oil over Canadian oil.
Guilbeault is then going to actually support foreign oil. So foreign, dirty blood oil that is produced with little to no ethical standard, little to no environmental standard, and really he's then supporting the development of jobs in places like Russia or Saudi Arabia instead of developing them right here in our own. It's a sad day for Alberta.
Catch the full interview with Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder coming up after Business News. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says his caucus will abide by a requirement that members of Parliament be vaccinated against COVID-19 or have a medical exemption to take their seats in the House of Commons. He says, however, that a question of privilege will be raised to challenge the improper conduct and precedent set by the Board of the Internal Economy, which established the vaccine mandate.
Only the House of Commons itself can determine its composition and its conduct, both before the Speaker or House rules and after they rule. The entire Conservative caucus will respect and abide by all the rules and all health guidance.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says he's promising to build a stronger and more independent province. The throne speech included a reference to Alberta's referendum question to remove equalization from the Constitution. The speech said the Saskatchewan government will be a full participant in those negotiations with Ottawa. Equalization directs tax money the federal government collects and gives to provinces with less income to ensure a better basic level of service for all Canadians.
We have said from day one, whether it be in our Council of Federation calls or publicly, that we'll support Alberta, in opening up a conversation with the federal government about the equalization formula and pointing out as to, just in which ways it's not fair to Canadians as a whole, either on how it's distributed or how it's actually, it's collected in a relatively fair way, but how it's distributed across Canada. So there'll be more conversations about that ahead, but we will be supporting Alberta in opening up a conversation with the federal government, which is required now by the fact that they have done a referendum on it.
9 more ICU patients are being transferred from Saskatchewan to Ontario over the next 4 days. The Ministry of Health says this will bring the total number of transfers to 16. The province reported 223 new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday. along with 2,440 active cases. There are also 5 more deaths attributed to the virus. There are currently 271 people in hospital with COVID, including 57 in intensive care. Ontario's Education Minister says take-home COVID-19 tests will be available at all public schools across the province starting in a few weeks' time.
While our cautious plan is demonstrably keeping schools safe, minimizing disruption, and maximizing safe in-person learning, we are taking nothing for granted. So to ensure we continue to keep schools safe, to make life easier for working parents, and to ensure your child can remain in school, today we're announcing that we're providing take-home PCR tests to all schools for all grades for both symptomatic students and close contact asymptomatic cases for students and staff.
A rapid testing program is also being expanded, and unvaccinated education workers will have to undergo rapid antigen testing 3 times a week instead of 2. A shooting in a small Yukon community left 2 people dead. Police say 61-year-old Ralph Shaw faces multiple charges, including 2 charges of first-degree murder in connection with a domestic dispute in Faro, Yukon on Tuesday. Police say the shootings also left 1 man critically injured.
The suspect had already left when police had arrived. The responding officers called in support for backup and provided initial first aid to this victim. Faro RCMP members then attended another residence on Harper Street and located a 42-year-old woman who was unresponsive. Community members and police made attempts at resuscitation and provided first aid, but they were unsuccessful. As I've stated earlier, 2 individuals are deceased, 1 woman, age 42, 1 man, age 73, and 1 man is being treated for critical injuries and is in stable condition at this time. At this point, we will not be releasing the names of the victims out of respect for the families.
A memorial wall has been set up in the United Kingdom honoring the lives of those lost during the COVID-19 pandemic. Around 140,000 in the UK succumbed to the illness, while worldwide the death toll is nearing 5 million people.
This grief is not like any other grief. Losing somebody during a pandemic to the virus that causes the pandemic, being separated from Steve, watching him slowly suffocating to death for 12 days. I can't get that out of my mind. And we need to understand how the policies and the government's advice and the guidance that was put out led to such a catastrophe.
It's a 9-minute walk from one end to the other, and everyone that comes here they can't help but think all those numbers they saw on the television were just numbers. They come here and they're beating hearts. They can't shy away from that.
It just needs to be a permanent memorial for our loved ones, and it does mean so much to me. And this is why I come down to help with the fellow bereaved, who are now my friends.
And for me, I think it's absolutely fulfilled the original intention, which was to remind people of the scale of our loss. You see it on people's faces when they come here for the first time and they're walking along and they gradually realise what they're looking at.
You know, considering we're near the end of October, the weather has been fairly mild here in southwestern Alberta, but there is a chance of some of the wet stuff arriving very soon. We'll have details with a full look at the weather forecast in just a moment. Yeah, let's have a look at that forecast. We were over 10 degrees again today, which we'll take for this time of year, right? Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, let's enjoy the mild temperatures because there's a chance of rain mixed with snow coming very soon.
Yeah, that's right. There is a low pressure system moving in tomorrow that is going to drop that temperature quite a bit. I know we're looking at a high of 9. Tomorrow's going to be a strange one. We're going to start with mild temperatures in the morning. Then the rain's going to fall. We're going to be seeing southwest winds gusting to 90 km at times. By the afternoon, that temperature is only going to look around 4 degrees. And then it's going to start raining again and a chance of flurries overnight on Friday night. So Friday is a bit of a mixed bag. By Saturday, though, we're looking at it clearing up for sunny skies. 3 degrees the high, staying with single digits during the whole weekend there. Sunday also 3 degrees for our trick-or-treaters. Overnight low on Sunday night, -11, so hopefully it doesn't get too cold for the kiddos. Sunshine on Monday, 9 degrees, and then climbing to 14 degrees on Tuesday and high of 12 on Wednesday. So we will be seeing those double digits again, so there is a light at the end of the tunnel there. Average high for this time of year, 10 degrees. degrees, -3 is the average. Low 23 was where we were at back in 1944. And in 1991, we had our chilliest, which was -26. 8:14 is when the sun rose this morning, and this evening our sun set right at 6:16 p.m., giving us 10 hours and 2 minutes of daylight today. Still a rainfall warning in effect for this evening in Victoria, but it should be clearing by tomorrow morning. 12 degrees the high tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Rain expected overnight tonight in Vancouver, also clearing by tomorrow, high of 11. 4 degrees the high in Edmonton tomorrow with mainly cloudy skies. And flurries, we're going to be seeing the white stuff in Calgary tomorrow. So 1 degree the high there, and rain mixed with flurries tomorrow. In Saskatoon, 8 degrees with a chance of rain, mix of sun and cloud in Regina tomorrow. Look at that temperature though, a lovely 16 degrees. 11 in Winnipeg with sunny skies. Over in the central part of the country, mainly cloudy skies over in Toronto, 12 degrees the high. 11 the high in Ottawa with sunshine. Sunshine also in Montreal tomorrow with a high of 11 degrees. Should be pretty decent. Over on the East Coast, as we look to Atlantic Canada, the high tomorrow in Fredericton at 13 degrees. Should be lovely. Sunshine there, mix of sun and cloud in Halifax. Also 13 expected there. 10 degrees expected in Charlottetown tomorrow, and a 40% chance of drizzle tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of 6 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
E-commerce company Shopify says its third quarter profits soared to nearly $1.5 billion US. That is up from $191.1 million a year earlier. Shopify says its bottom line was boosted by a $1.34 billion unrealized gain on its equity investments. Revenue also rose 46% from a year ago to $1.12 billion. On an adjusted basis, the company says it earned $32 million less in the third quarter compared with 2020. Starbucks Canada says it is raising wages and benefits amid critical staffing shortages and a renewed commitment to the well-being of its workers. Beginning in January, the company says starting wages will be increased to $1 above provincial minimums, while workers who have been with the company a year will receive a 6 to 10% pay hike. It says the wage boost will impact around 20,000 workers and bring the hourly pay for baristas to between $13 and $20.45 an hour, depending on location and tenure. There will be a few dollars more for shift supervisors as well. Coca-Cola is getting its Fizz back. The beverage company says revenue jumped 16% to $10 billion in the third quarter as stadiums, movie theaters, and other venues reopened around the world. Coke says sales for home consumption also remains pretty strong. It says its net income jumped 42% to $2.5 billion US and has raised its revenue and earnings guidance for the year. Experts say it's in Shaw's best interest to stay the course in its acquisition by Rogers Communications, despite the battle for control which is rocking the Toronto-based company. They say the merger remains a win for Calgary-based Shaw because it would be better off as part of a combined company, and Rogers is one of the only possible suitors in the country. Shaw CEO Brad Shaw says he remains committed to the deal despite the drama. It would owe Rogers a break fee of $800 million if it walks away, and if Rogers backs out, it must pay Shaw $1.2 billion. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 242 points on the day to finish at 21,198. The Dow was up 239 points to 35,730. The S&P 500 was up 44 points to 4596. And the Nasdaq was up 212 points on the day to 15,448. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 15 cents to 82.81 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 42 cents to 5.78 US. Gold was even at 17.98.91 US an ounce, and silver was also even at 24.08 US an ounce. Wheat is at $11.67 per bushel, barley's at $9.40, canola's at $21.45, and corn is at $10.21 per bushel. Live cattle were down $2.73 to $124.50. Feeder cattle were up 18 cents to $156.68, and lean hogs were up $3.23 to $75.20. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 81.01 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a union representing Alberta healthcare sector employees says the state of ambulance service in the province is dire. The Health Sciences Association of Alberta says it's at the point where people can no longer be certain an ambulance will be available when they need one. President Mike Parker says there have been 135 red alerts in recent weeks in 12 communities, including Edmonton and Calgary. Alberta Health Services says it is seeing an increase in emergency calls up to 30% this year, but says those alerts may only last a few minutes and do not mean paramedics are unable to respond to emergencies. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder took issue with some of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recent minister appointments. MP Harder will explain why all Albertans and Canadians should be concerned in just a moment. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently swore in his new cabinet, and there were some major changes. Are they good or maybe bad changes for Canadians? To talk about this in a little more detail is Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder, joining us here in Lethbridge. Rachel, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hi, Hal. It's so good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you've been a big, staunch supporter of Alberta's energy sector, the oil and gas industry. What do you think of the appointments of Stephen Guilbeault, a former Greenpeace activist, as Environment Minister, and Jonathan Wilkinson as Natural Resources Minister? Many feel that these appointments are a direct attack on our energy sector.
Well, I think this is bad news for Canada, and it really couldn't get much worse for Alberta. We're talking about a man who really is a stunt activist. We're talking about an individual who, ran around in an orange jumpsuit with Greenpeace labeled on the front of it. And he hung from the CN Tower in order to draw attention to his cause. So he has spent a lifetime basically, going after those who would develop the oil and gas sector or those who would work within the industry. It's sad. It's really sad. And, probably the biggest reason why it's sad is because instead of focusing on developing Canada's energy sector, where we do it from a place of being incredibly environmentally responsible, we have some of the strictest laws in the world. We provide people with a good wage. We treat people fairly. It's clean oil. And instead of developing our sector, really what this minister is going to choose to do is Guilbeault is then going to actually support foreign oil. So foreign, dirty blood oil that is produced with little to no ethical standard, little to no environmental standard. And really, he's then supporting the development of jobs in places like Russia or Saudi Arabia instead of developing them right here in our own country. It's a sad day for Alberta.
That must be very frustrating as well when you see the demand for oil going through the roof right now with a lot of developing nations, and our hands are really tied here in Alberta. It must be very frustrating.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, as soon as this announcement was made, it certainly was soul crushing for me, but I think for many Albertans. We work incredibly hard to support this country. We work very, very hard to support our families. And ultimately, at the end of the day, energy is the source of life. Without it, we really can't function in our day-to-day. And so I recognize the need to transition and to look at alternative energy sources by all means. But the reality is oil and gas is here to stay. We do need to continue to support this industry here at home. Otherwise, we're just simply sending money overseas and developing someone else's industry.
Now, your party leader, Erin O'Toole, said Prime Minister Justin Trudeau picked a number of inexperienced MPs to become ministers, choosing style over substance. Would you really agree with that statement? And if so, why?
Hal, I would agree with that statement. And here's why. I think it's the Prime Minister's responsibility to put together a cabinet based on merit or ability. He should be choosing the strongest women and men from within his caucus to help lead this country forward. We're at a crossroads here. We're at a place where we need strong, capable leadership at the helm. Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau did not look at people based on their merit. Instead, it was simply an opportunity for him to choose, based on wanting to send virtue signals to the Canadian public. I think that's a sad day for Canadians, because at the end of the day, Canadians deserve to be governed well. They deserve to have individuals who are leading us because they are capable, because they have the experience, because they are going to do a good job. Let's take, for example, Melanie Joly. She was Heritage Minister, and then she was Minister for Tourism. She failed, arguably, at both of these portfolios, and they're minor. And now she's been given global affairs, which is one of Canada's largest and most important portfolios. We're talking about Canada's relationship with places like China and Russia. We're talking about important matters of having to do with global security and a way forward. It's not a time to choose someone based on wanting to send a virtue signal to the Canadian public. Instead, it was a time to choose someone based on their ability to lead us through this difficult time.
Now, Rachel, you recently took to social media blasting the Liberals for not giving Canadians employment insurance benefits if they lose their job due to not being vaccinated. Now, many would agree with you that it's simply wrong, but other people would say, you know what, being vaccinated is important since it really protects you and others from COVID-19.
Well, I think, first off, this is not a discussion about whether or not vaccines are good or bad. Vaccines have been proven to be effective for sure. This is actually a discussion about coercion. This is a discussion about Canadians and their right to choose. This is a discussion about respecting our fundamental rights and freedoms as described under the Charter. So when we have individuals who are willing to be tested on a daily basis, hardworking individuals who make this choice, they're willing to be tested on a daily basis. Many of these individuals have defended us on the front lines, whether that's through nursing or being a doctor or a firefighter or a police officer, a social worker, etc. Many of these individuals would prefer to do daily testing. The government is saying, no, that's not an option. And if you should lose your job because you choose not to be vaccinated, then you are not going to be able to qualify for EI, which EI is something that these individuals have paid into. It's not the government's money, it's their money. It's simply being held in trust until needed. Well, perhaps it's needed. And so it is unthinkable, it is unimaginable that the government would then usurp its authority to keep your money from you in a time of need. It's absolutely wrong.
Now, speaking of money, many economists agree that Canada has a little bit of a spending problem. We also hear the same message from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, which says our debt is now over $1 trillion. In fact, Canada's inflation rate rose to a new 18-year high at 4.4%. I mean, buying food and shelter and gas just keeps going up, Rachel. How can we help bring these things under control and make life more affordable for Canadians?
Yeah, Hal, you're asking a very important question, and it's the one that is on the minds of many Canadians. We've all noticed that the cost of living has gone up dramatically. A recent Angus Reid poll showed that over a third of Canadian families found it difficult to put enough food on their table during the pandemic. That's scary. When we're talking about the basic necessities of life being held at bay because people cannot afford it. Why can they not afford it? Let me tell you. They cannot afford it because of inflation, because the cost of living is going up, everything from rent to gasoline to food. And so as a result, then people are not able to look after their families. But what I find interesting, Hal, is actually when we look at the stats, their income, the average Canadian income actually has gone up over the last year. Meanwhile, the cost of living, though, has skyrocketed so much more than their income has. And so as a result, it doesn't balance out and people are having to pay a lot more to live. Because that's the case, it puts us in jeopardy as people, it puts us in jeopardy as a country, et cetera, et cetera. You asked about the answer. The answer is simple, Hal. Stop printing money. Stop spending money that we don't have. Stop borrowing. Instead, return to fiscal responsibility, return to balanced budgets, and allow Canadians to actually earn a dollar that really counts as a dollar and be able to afford the life that they deserve to live.
You know, spending the money we don't have, that actually segues nicely into our next point here. Now, the federal director from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano, who's a regular in our program here, he talked about the 2 salary increases the MPs received during the pandemic and how it wasn't the greatest timing considering how many Canadians are still struggling. Can you respond to that?
Oh, I'd love to, Hal. I wrote a letter on both occasions asking that the wage not be given to me. I fundamentally disagree with it. Full stop.
Did any other MPs join in your efforts? Did you talk to them as well, saying, you know what, this is bad timing right now, guys. Think about what we're doing.
Yeah. You know what, Hal, unfortunately, at the end of the day, there's a piece of legislation that basically just puts it into motion year to year. There's a salary increase that takes place every spring. The only thing that can stop that is if the Prime Minister brings a bill or a motion to the House of Commons, which I would have invited, in fact, did invite through my letter, and the Prime Minister turned that down.
Wow. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced as well that Parliament will not return until November the 22nd. Now, you and many other Conservative MPs said that it's way too long to get back to work. Why the delay by the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, I suppose your guess is as good as mine, but if I was to offer my own observation as a sitting member of Parliament, I would say if Parliament doesn't sit, then there's little opportunity for opposition to oppose or give accountability. And so I think, Justin Trudeau, for whatever reason, seems to be afraid of these things. He seems to be afraid of being held accountable. He seems to be afraid of the parliamentary precinct and all that comes with that. And so he really would prefer not to be there, which is ironic because he ran for election. He ran to become the prime minister of this country, which includes sitting in the House of Commons, making tough decisions, and being held accountable by the official opposition and other opposition parties. Now he's saying, no. Actually, he doesn't really want that. He just kind of wants to do his own thing, including going to Ticino with his family. That's wrong. It's wrong that this country has a prime minister that is not wanting to do the very job that he's elected to do. And he is refusing to be held accountable for the decisions that he is making in the meantime. It's, I think ultimately at the end of the day, Canadians have an opportunity to speak up, to speak out, and I would invite them to do so. Please write letters. Please speak to your friends and family. Please go to social media. Please call upon the Prime Minister to take his seat in the House of Commons and to resume Parliament. We need it now.
Now, once Parliament is back in session, will controversial bills like the one that died on the table during the election, Bill C6, adding conversion therapy to the criminal code, will these be brought back and resurface?
I would say it's certainly very likely that we will see some of these controversial bills come forward. You gave one example, Bill C6. It's my hope that if it's revisited, that it'll be reviewed thoroughly. It was rushed through in the spring, and there were many good amendments brought forward by experts from across the country, and those amendments were ignored. And I think Canadians deserve to have due process taken, and so those amendments should be revisited, and many of them should be taken in order to strengthen that legislation. But I think there's two other bills that are front of mind for myself and for many other Canadians as well, and that is Bill C10 and Bill C36, which have to do with censorship. And so we're talking about a government that is wanting to censor what we can and cannot say online, as well as the information that we can and cannot access. It's wrong. Again, many legal experts have weighed in on this, and they have said that these pieces of legislation go further than places like China, Turkey, Iran, and Russia. That's not a place we want to be held. We're a free democratic state. We want to keep ourselves that way. And so I will be opposing Bill C10 and Bill C36 with everything in me. And I invite Canadians to join me in the good fight.
Yes, we love our home and native land and our freedom, definitely. Rachel, many social conservatives believe that during the last federal election campaign, Tory leader Erin O'Toole, your leader, went a little too far to the left, a little too far to the center on a number of issues, including changing his mind on the carbon tax. How can the Conservative Party of Canada win back the support and show Albertans and Canadians that they're still, in fact, conservative?
It's a fair question, Hal. Certainly, I was out there knocking on thousands of doors during the election, and I definitely heard some concern from a cohort within, within what would be conservative support normally. There was some disappointment, and there continues to be some disappointment. I'm disappointed. I think many of my caucus members are disappointed. I think Erin O'Toole himself is disappointed. It's certainly not the outcome we were hoping for. And so, now we have an opportunity, and I would even say a responsibility, to go back and assess the decisions that were made and to ask, are those the decisions that are in the best interest of Canadians? And, are we in line with what the grassroots members of our party are asking for or calling for? I mean, after all, we are a grassroots-led party, which means we do have to turn to our membership and we do have to give them a voice. And so I think in the coming months, every effort needs to be put forward to hear those individuals who have something to say on this issue. And then we have a responsibility to respond accordingly. And ultimately, it's Mr. O'Toole who's going to need to lead that process.
Let's talk about one of the referendum questions on the recent ballot from the municipal election here, and it was about reforming equalization. Now, the majority of Albertans voted yes to the idea, and apparently Premier Jason Kenney says he's going to take this message to Ottawa, present it to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But Rachel, let me ask you something. You've got the pulse of what's happening on the Hill. Do you think the Prime Minister will heed the message from Albertans and actually look into making this more of a fair deal for us?
again, a great question and something that very much grieves me. We have a prime minister who really couldn't care less about the province of Alberta and even Western Canada as a whole. We have a prime minister who's very committed to pitting one region against another. And we see that time and time again in the legislation that he brings forward and the decisions that he makes for this country. One prime example would be Bill C-69, which is a discriminatory environmental bill that is a direct attack on Alberta and the things that allow us to prosper. Now, what's interesting enough is that the Prime Minister is more than happy to punish us for the things that deliver prosperity, such as oil and gas. However, he also still wants the money that traditionally comes with that sector. You can't have it both ways. And so I think Albertans are speaking up. Nearly 62% of Albertans said they want to see reform. They don't like the deal that we're getting right now. They don't think it's fair. And so, it is my hope that Premier Kenney is successful in being a voice on behalf of Albertans, that he's able to push for change, and ultimately that Albertans are respected for the incredible contributions that they make to this country. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, a strong Canada means a strong Alberta.
Amen to that. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder, thanks so much for your time today.
It's my pleasure, Hal. Thanks so much for having me.
If you ever plan to visit the dinosaur capital of the world, I'm talking about Drumheller, Alberta, you might also want to set your GPS for a little hamlet about 25 minutes away from there called Rosebud. It's only got about 100 people, although throughout the year it's a place where hundreds and hundreds more congregate for the sake of the arts. I'm talking about Rosebud Center of the Arts and Rosebud Theater, which is a destination in itself. Well, we had the chance to reach out to its artistic director, Morris Artman, to find out all about this magical little place. So, Morris, can you maybe give us a little brief history of the Rosebud Theater? What is it? What's it all about?
Well, we're a theater company located in a small town an hour east of Calgary. It's a town of 100 people. It started out 35 years ago as a fundraiser. The theater started as a fundraiser for Rosebud School of the Arts, which had been established before then. And they started putting on plays to raise money for the school, and people came. This is before my time. And people came. And when I arrived in 2001, the theater was playing for 25,000 people every year. 3 shows, 25,000 people coming to Rosebud from across the province and beyond. And it's a destination theater that now has now we do 5 shows a year, plus 2 student shows, plus a student dance show. And it's a fully professional company now. We hire actors and we have a resident company of actors and teachers, and we incorporate students. So it's exploded over the years, but it's something that it's a theater that captured the imagination of Albertans.
That's so cool. So little tiny Rosebud, population 100, suddenly multiplies when you have a show.
It sure does. It's on a summer show that's selling out on a Saturday, our population of under 100 turns into 600 people.
Ah, cool.
With 500 patrons coming from across the province. And I'm rounding the numbers up a little bit, of course. But,
of course. Well,
so all of a sudden, it's just filled with energy, yeah?
Definitely, and it's putting Rosebud on the map, that's for sure. What is your involvement in the theater?
Well, I'm the artistic director of the theater. So my job is to program plays and hire artists and put together the teams that make the plays, and I direct a fair number of the plays as well. And so my job is programming and connecting with the audience and listening to people and finding out, how people are responding to the shows and trying to keep your finger on what's current and what's possible for us here. And I don't know, mostly my job is to love the theater and get to pick plays that we want to do as a company.
So what's the mission of the Rosebud Theater?
The mission is to produce plays that illustrate beauty, and coming together, and grace and hope and possibility. And another part of our mandate as a theater is to also train the next generation of theater artists. So not only are we presenting plays that are hopeful in nature, that are about coming together, that are about including everybody and welcoming everybody, we're also training young artists to become all that they can be and to go out into the world and do what they need to do. So that's really why we exist.
That's so cool. So what are some of the highlights that Rosebud Theater brings to the community?
It's interesting because practically speaking, we have some really, really wonderful bed and breakfasts here in town. And it's a little like the company town. In the sense that we're the economic engine of Little Rosebud, and there are these marvelous B&Bs and everything else that, of course, serve our patrons when they come. So that's one of the things that we provide. And then the other thing, we opened a show here on Friday. We brought in a show called "Tomatoes Tried to Kill Me, but Banjos Saved My Life." And it's our first time back on the stage, since last Christmas when we tried to open for a couple of weeks. And talking to patrons as they were having their meal, people are just so grateful to come back because there's something about the feeling of coming to the theater in a little place like this that I think is magical for people. And there's something about the accessibility of the fact of the matter is that you're going to bump into the actor that performed in the show because the place is so small. And so there are all these connections that people have to the performers here. And it kind of feels like our audience is family because of how small we are, right? So that's a highlight in general of, I think, what we deliver here. And I think what we receive. I mean, what group of artists gets to receive that? To have that connection with the audience that's that intimate.
That's so cool. It's like a symbiotic relationship a little bit. So how have you guys been able to handle the challenges during COVID? That must have been hard because it sounds like you guys are very connected and you need that connection with the audience and everything. It must have been very challenging.
Yeah, it has been. And we've really survived the last 20 months because of the kindness and the generosity of patrons and donors that have helped to keep us afloat. And a remarkable board of governors who have, made decisions and done things to help keep us afloat. And I have to say that it's also our staff. We had to do temporary layoffs just to stay afloat because most of our income comes from ticket sales, and when you can't sell tickets, we've got a problem. And so really it's been because of the goodwill of a lot of people that we've survived. And we've had to make, we had to scale back. And the school, though, Rosebud School of the Arts, the actual teaching part of what we do has continued through this time. And we were lucky enough, because we're small, to have what's called a cohort, and we could do in-person classes. And so, last spring, we produced a student production that we hoped maybe we could open for an audience, and we wound up, of course, broadcasting it like everybody else has had to do.
Right.
And so there's been a big learning curve, but that's how we've survived.
Yeah, but the students and the actors must have absolutely loved it because it got them back out on the stage, so to speak. It got them back acting. That's awesome. Now, what's the capacity of the theater? I'm picturing it really tiny because the town is tiny, but you're saying it can hold a lot of people, it sounds like.
Well, we have two theaters that we, one is called the Rosebud Opera House. It's 230 seats. So still not a big theater. Still feels intimate, but 230 seats. And the other theater is our BMO Studio Stage, and it's a really intimate black box theater, which means that it's a black box with lights, and we can seat about 70 people in that theater. And so we have two theaters that we program for, and that's what they're like.
Okay. Awesome. So what do you guys, what's on the horizon for the theater coming this fall and winter? Any theater productions planned?
Yeah, we're right now we have running this show called Tomatoes Tried to Kill Me, but Banjos Saved My Life. And what's so great about it is that it is, it's the author is performing the show. He's not an actor. He's a man who made his life in business. And I mean, his story's amazing. It's all about a guy who finds the miracle of his heart, really, by learning how to play the banjo after he retires from business. And it's really a moving and really interesting and really entertaining show. So that's running right now. And then in November, we'll open A Christmas Carol for Christmas, and that's starring Nathan Schmidt, who is one of our resident actors, and he's beloved and an incredible performer. And he tells the whole story as a streetwise storyteller, and but it's a visually stunning show that's got all these beautiful woodcut etchings of Victorian England, and they move, and he moves through them, and he tells this story, and he's remarkable. And that's opening at Christmas time, and we're in plans, of course, for 2022, and hope to in a few weeks announce our 2022 season. And we're stepping forward in faith that we're going to be able to do 2022. That COVID is not going to take us out, but I'm optimistic about that. It'll be about the size of our audience. It'll be about capacity, but we'll step forward with a full season of plays in 2022.
I think that's everybody's hope for 2022. No matter who you talk to.
Yeah, it sure is.
Definitely. Now, do you guys have a website if anyone's interested in buying tickets to your shows?
Yeah, just go to rosebudtheater.com, and you'll be able to purchase tickets. Right now these shows are we've chosen to run them at half capacity so that we can have some physical distancing in the theater, and of course, like everybody else, we have to have people have to be have had their vaccine or a negative COVID test to be able to come. And of course, our staff is that way as well. It's good to be open. Oh, boy.
Oh, definitely. Where do you see the theater in the future? I know you're remaining very optimistic and hopeful, but any long range plans there?
Well, 2023 is the anniversary year of the start of Rosebud School of the Arts as an organization when Laverne Erickson started it as a summer arts camp for high school students. So we're going to put on a splash of a season that's going to celebrate the roots of this place, and I hope just pack the house. I want to pack the house in 2022, but in 2023, we're looking forward to a big celebration. And then beyond that, we have lots of dreams. We have dreams about a concert series. Oh, the other thing, something very important. Next summer, and this started during COVID, we had outdoor summer concerts every weekend. We brought in acts, folk acts, and different kind of acts, and they played on an outdoor stage. Next summer, we're going to continue that. But now, when you come to Rosebud on the weekend, you'll be able to see a play in the Opera House stage, play on the studio stage, a concert on our this gorgeous outdoor concert stage that we've got right next to the Opera House, and stay in a beautiful B&B, and you can make a weekend out of it. And we hope to sort of expand that kind of programming over the next number of years, so that when people come here, they can make a trip and take in a lot of wonderfulness.
Morris Artman, Artistic Director for the Rosebud Theater, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm Jeanette Roche. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.